and not everybody seems to be online yet, but I hope everyone's okay. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go by group. So I'd like to begin with group one. I believe that's Mickey, you're here from group one. The rest of your team joining? Hi.
Yeah, I think Tomomi has a difficult time with the time difference, but
Oh, okay.
Ian is here. Chloe should be coming.
Okay, shall we wait a little bit? Do you have your slides there? Who has the slides?
I'm not sure if I have the complete version. I think Chloe uploaded our video.
I didn't see anything on Dropbox. Let me have a good look. Oh yeah, hang on. That maybe just came in. So okay, got it. Let me down. See you. Let me download that. Sorry, it's taking a while to download. Okay. Oh yeah. So can I just check then that I'm getting this right? So Mickey, you want me to play this recording, okay? Is that right?
Yes, please.
And then group two. What is the status of your presentation? That's Camelia and Wenhan Shao, Shiji Wang. Have you?
We're presenting it online together.
Okay, great. Group three have already shared their presentation with me as well, so I have that file. How about group four?
We have it, but we're so sorry we didn't send it yet.
Okay.
We're sending it now.
Is it a recording?
Sorry?
It's a recording or?
No, it's no slide. It's just a slide.
Oh, you're going to come and do it here? Okay, all right
We
then.
send the slides to you either way.
Yeah, okay.
We have it on the left.
All right, but then how are we going to show that connect? Are you going to be able to connect? Okay.
Can we?
Yeah, and then we can just use this microphone, yeah? I hope. But maybe you can come here and you present from here. So you control your slides and then use the mic so you would be muted. Sorry, it's a bit of a challenge because we have different ways of making presentations today. Some live, some recorded, and so on. But I hope everybody's fine and that you're coping with the summer heat and that you've all managed to bring your presentations together. Can I also request that you try to send your presentations to me a little bit before the class session, otherwise I'm kind of struggling to bring everything together. And then the next thing, just one request I have is, if you haven't filled in the course evaluation yet, could you please do it? Because I'm trying to get like almost 100% evaluations completed, and I've got about 15 so far. So we're about halfway through. And yeah, so whoever hasn't done it, could you try maybe even during this class to complete the evaluation? Any questions? All good? Okay, well, let me see. I'm going to now try to share the first presentation with you all, which is sitting here. Vicky, would you like to just introduce it for us? What is the topic?
Yeah, so we're talking about the city of Curitiba in Brazil, which has been called like a model green city. So we wanted to look at a city that's like in the global south and maybe that not as many people know about. And we're looking at the different successes, how they were able to achieve them, but then also some failures and like ways that maybe this like it's maybe been overhyped in a way, or the city hasn't like kept up the image so much and how it can improve like in the future. Yeah.
Great, yeah, it's a city that I've heard a lot about, but I've also haven't been tracking it, so it'd be nice to get an update to see what's been going on there. So first of all, I'm trying to get the slide up and go to share mode. Make sure share sound. Okay, and are you all seeing the slides there? Yep. Okay. So let me go to full screen and are we ready? Let us begin then.
Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation about the sustainable Curitiba as the Brazil's model green city. So Curitiba is in the southern Brazilian state of Paraná and it was founded in 1693. So before in 1950s, the Curitiba's population is very small. However, like other developing cities, as population grows, they face a serious urban ills such as population explosion, traffic congestion, environmental pollution, and so on. However, after 40 years of efforts, by 2010, despite a total population of nearly 2 million, it has become one of the most livable cities in the world, and it has the highest human development index in Brazil. It also is awarded as the Global Sustainable City in 2012 by United Nations. So as we can see, Curitiba is one of the safest cities in Brazil, and the living cost in Curitiba is much less than if you want to live in Tokyo. And it also attracts a lot of companies of high technology to build technology centers in the city. So today, 80% of Curitiba's employment is in the service sector, particularly in non-polluting technology-heavy information services. So we can see Curitiba has become a very successful example of the sustainable and green cities in developing countries as Brazil. And let's look at the guidelines and planning in Brazil as a whole. Here are the five most extremely important rules of the city planning. So as we can see today, conditions persist that some researchers has found that the urban expansion planning of emerging cities of Latin America at maybe importantly in Brazil, was strongly influenced by the guarantee of rights to sustainable cities, city planning, provision of urban and community equipment, adequacy of instrument and public spending, protection, preservation, and restoration of the natural and built environment. So some cities are managed without planning, and it has influenced its success in achieving the goals with the instrument of economic, tax, and financial policies. So despite we have these rules, some cities are still have struggling to reach them and then become a successful city as Curitiba. So let's look at the development of Curitiba and how it reaches these goals. So there are the timelines of the development. In 1943, they introduced the Agache Plan. This is the first comprehensive plan of city planning. And then later on, in 1966, they introduced the master plan, which I'll explain later on in my next slide. And then, as we can see, after introducing these plans, the urbanization and the mechanization of agriculture increased, and then it bursts the economy and makes it win growth and urbanization rates. So who is the biggest hero of all this city planning? It was the Jamie Lehner, who was elected as the mayor of Curitiba in 1971. He was an architect and serves as a director of the Curitiba Urban Planning and Design Institute. He challenged conventional thinking and ventured into new experience in urban planning. So Curitiba implemented the master plan in 1965, which was selected by a competition, and developed by him. The concept of this planning is that urban transportation should meet people's travel needs rather than cars. And
there are varieties of initiatives that the city of Curitiba has taken that makes up its reputation as the green and sustainable city. Here we will explore 4 different aspects, including water bodies, green spaces, transportation, and education. First, one of the key aspects of the early planning of the city was the management of water bodies. Flood and the lack of water inside of the city was a major problem for Curitiba. To solve this, one of the key stakeholders, Nicolas Capel, who is an architect, that stood out to make changes. Instead of only building infrastructure to prevent the flood, they came up with the idea for making lakes in the city to be used as a retention pond and also help collect the runoff and manage floods, as well as this solid waste management project, such as the garbage that is not garbage and green exchange project, has also contributed to cleaner waters through having less garbage to be polluting the water as well. Next, the green spaces in Curitiba is also amazing. There are almost 60 meters square of green spaces per capita in Curitiba. This is 5 times more than the WHO recommended 12 meters square that some of the biggest cities in the world cannot achieve yet. Today, there are more than 20 policies for protection, conservation, creation, and the recovery of the green spaces in the city. These green spaces has contributed to controlling the floods and also to protect the valley floors and riverbanks in the city as well. It is also what makes up the global image of Curitiba as one of the greenest cities in the world as well. The transportation system, bus rapid transit, or the BRT, is also an important aspect that contributes to the livable and sustainable city of Curitiba today. The system began planning in the 1950s and to the 1960s, and it is used even today. Thanks to the governor, James Lerner, the system was to reduce urban traffic and provide easily accessible and affordable public transit for the citizens. It indeed benefited in many ways, such as the cheap transportation for both the city and the passengers. For the passengers, it only cost 6 rias, a little more than €1 or $1 for one that to travel entire networks of the BRT that we can see in the left side. And for the government, it was also very cheap because the BRT lanes only costed 50 times less than the subway when it was first established. Today, the BRT is aiming to limit pollutions through using more hybrid buses and also making electric buses more. Last but not least, educational initiatives in Curitiba is also important for the continuous sustainability of the city. At local schools, students can bring recycled materials to school to trade with notebooks and toys in order to learn the importance of recycling. In the other parts, the Municipal School of Sustainability and the Lighthouse of Knowledge are both built for all citizens to be able to participate in activities and workshops in order to raise awareness of the sustainability of the city. These initiatives have contributed to the 22% of recycle rate in Curitiba compared to the national average of 3% in Brazil.
Despite all of these green initiatives, there is reason to believe that Curitiba's sustainability performance has actually weakened over the years. We interviewed an exchange student from Curitiba who said, quote, "It was great in the 70s and 80s. We are not in the 70s and 80s anymore." This can be attributed in large part to insufficient adaptation to Curitiba's rapid population increase, with only 360,000 residents in the 60s and over 1.8 million today. There's been huge urban expansion, particularly in the lower income outskirts and south of the city, creating spatial inequality which our interviewee described as essentially dividing Curitiba into 2 or 3 different cities along socioeconomic lines. Sustainable initiatives, economic development, access to culture, and green areas have been kept largely exclusive to the north. And furthermore, there are concerns over the rising carbon emissions from the city's supposedly green transportation infrastructure. So let's take a closer look at Curitiba's BRT system as the most prominent indicator of its weakening performance. Despite population growth, the number of BRT users dropped by 42% between 1995 and 2015. We can see in these graphs that Curitiba, shown in red, has had a trend of decreasing use of public transportation and increased car use. So what happened? With population growth, Curitiba's buses and roads have become overcrowded. These crowds lead to bus delays, even with bus-exclusive traffic lanes. Furthermore, lack of punctuality, connectivity, particularly to low-income areas, and people-centered design, make bus journeys long and arduous. All of this, along with decreased import taxes and petrol prices, have made private vehicles more attractive and the BRT a last resort. The BRT's two largest failures can be boiled down to fare prices and periphery access. BRT fares have become unsustainably expensive, with a feedback loop where a decrease in passengers creates decreased revenue, which in turn forces the bus company to increase its fares, thereby making the bus system even less attractive to users. Many low-income Curitibans have to travel long distances for work. In the 70s, Brazilian families earning the equivalent of up to 3 Brazilian minimum wages spent 5.8% of their monthly income on transportation. In 2020, this number was estimated as high as 20%. Today, Curitiba's buses have the third most expensive fare in Brazil, which many say is just too high, especially when it can be cheaper and faster to just drive your own car, get an Uber when traveling in a group, or simply walk. The lack of access to periphery areas is the other main failure of Curitiba, which is one of the only Brazilian cities where public transportation coverage has actually decreased over the past decade. Low-income residents of southern Curitiba have few other options besides making a very long, uncomfortable, and expensive journey on public transportation to reach the central areas, as their neighborhoods are often too hilly to bicycle and lack pedestrian sidewalks.
With the problems that Miki mentioned earlier, there have been growing criticisms about Curitiba's once award-winning transportation system. One of the key players in Curitiba's city planning, transportation expert Carlos Eduardo, commented in an interview that the city needs to be given back to its citizens. The Planning Institute and the government have been criticized for becoming complacent and less creative than they used to be in adapting to the dynamic and changing needs of the city. Instead, they cling on to Curitiba's existing international reputation. This signals a government in denial, as powerful political actors sponsor institutional propaganda to promote Curitiba's sustainable image. In reality, locals seek reduced transportation costs. They hope for increased frequency and greater connectivity in the city, and those who are frustrated turn to car ownership, which makes Curitiba less sustainable and affordable for all. Due to cost and environmental limitations, Curitiba has been unable to create a subway system or monorail, despite the wishes of local residents. Instead, they continue working to revise the bus system to keep up with the needs of locals. Their last project, which came into its operation in 2009, is the establishment of the Green Line. It is the 6th BRT corridor of Curitiba, with aims of converting to fully biodiesel-powered buses. Through creating an express line, up to 23 neighborhoods connect 287,000 inhabitants. Furthermore, when compared to buses that use regular diesel, these buses produce 30% less CO2 and 70% less smoke. As such, the Green Line is a reflection of Curitiba's efforts to continue improving the transportation and sustainability of the city. But what more can and should Curitiba do? The Green Line is a good example of Curitiba's improvements to the system, but it is not quite enough. How can we return the city to the people and avoid prioritizing automobiles over pedestrians? One way is through capacity expansion of existing corridors. By shifting the space between the current bus stations and removing parking for cars, space can be made for additional lanes, just like what we saw with the Green Line. There, express buses can run through. Perhaps more corridors can be expanded to allow for better connectivity with different bus lines. And another suggestion is to make work hours more flexible to decrease traffic congestion. However, given that people working low-income jobs have stricter time schedules, it may be difficult to implement. This leads us to a final food for thought. Who is public transportation meant for, and who needs it the most? Probably we can guess that low-income people rely on public transportation more critically in order to get around. So who really is the city being designed for, and how can we make it more ethical? We would like to finish our presentation with a quote from our interview with our local Curitiba resident. He says, "Curitiba is still the best city in Brazil for public transport, but I don't think the politicians really want the best for the city, but just the best for the rich. The transport network needs to be redesigned and optimized for the people." What do you think? With that, we have come to the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Tomomi. This sums up our presentation today, and here are our references. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Well done. I really enjoyed that, and I found it very, very interesting to have that update on the situation in Curitiba. And I think you kind of put your finger on a problem that affects many big cities around the world, even the ones that have fairly good public transportation systems at one point in time. Eventually, if people start to shift over to using their own cars, then you also see a change in the priorities of the local government, and they spend less on public transport and more on roads and so on. But what actually happens then is building extra roads doesn't reduce congestion. It actually encourages more people to start driving, and the problems get worse there. But I thought that was really interesting, and I don't know, does anybody have any questions? I have a question about safety. You mentioned that compared to other cities, Brazilian cities, Curitiba is much safer. But I just wonder, what is the reason for that? Was there anything that you came across while you were doing your research about the city that suggests that why it might be, safer than somewhere like Rio de Janeiro, etc.? Was there anything that you could say about that? Would anybody from Group 1 like to respond?
That's not a point that we looked like very closely into, but I do think that Curitiba is well, first one of the wealthier cities in Brazil. And so there's just generally less crime. And yeah, maybe although wealth inequality is very profound across Brazil, I think in Curitiba it's not quite as extreme as, for example, in Sao Paulo or in Rio.
Okay, all right, that's interesting to know. I guess also with regards to the bus system, is it private or is it in public ownership? Do you have any? Did you find that out?
It is a private company that has a contract with the government.
Okay, so that also has certain limitations, because if it was, for instance, a municipal run bus service, maybe then there's possibilities to think a little bit about discounting tickets for people who are commuting to work, or even thinking more radically about how you could really reduce the ticket prices and get people back onto the buses again. But if it's a private company, that means it's quite difficult because there has to be a negotiation between the municipality and also the private company to get them to think about changing the prices there. But this is another problem we find in many cities is that yeah, because the tickets are so high, the usership drops, and then you have another problem in maintaining the service. Yeah, Tomomi-san?
Yeah, so when we asked our friend like during the interview, he talked about how like one reason he feels less inclined to take the buses is because when he was younger, he remembers that like bus fares used to be like free on Sundays. So there was like an incentive. And I guess some part of it is like it used to be this way and now it's no longer. So he also feels unhappy. And I read that they did reduce the bus fare on Sundays. Maybe like it was once free, and then it started to become charged, and then they reduced it by 50% again, probably because people were unhappy with this change. But even then, I can imagine that it's not the same, especially if the prices have increased over time. Like a discount is not necessarily going to be much cheaper than what it used to be. So yeah, I think definitely like the negotiation between the private company and the government, there might be some limitations. And our friend mentioned that he would really like for the company to be state-owned so that they have more say. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, if you think about London, London has something called the congestion charge. So if they had a congestion charge in Curitiba, maybe the money that you're charging for cars to come into the city could then subsidize the public transport. Something like that might make a big difference. The other thing I've noticed happening in some cities in the north of England is that they are basically the municipalities are buying out the bus companies and bringing them back into public ownership. So again, that could also be an option for a place like Curitiba if they want to get back their reputation of having cheap, accessible, sustainable public transport. But I think it's a great case study, and thank you very much for sharing it with us. Anyone else have a comment or question? No? Okay, then we'll go to the next group. And you said you were going to share your slides with us. So who is, okay, Yuri is going to do so. Excellent, okay. So whenever you are ready, please begin your presentation.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you very well. I'm going to check
So,
classroom as well. Okay, great. Go ahead.
okay. So, hello everyone. Today our group will talk about the case study of the smart city Aspern-Seestadt in Vienna, Austria. Next slide, please. And there are four main points that we're going to focus on: the overview of the project, an evaluation of its strengths and weaknesses, and finally give some recommendations. Next slide, please. If you think about what unites Barcelona, New York, London, and Singapore, the answer would be the fact that they're all granted the title of smart city. Next slide, please. Austria's capital, Vienna, the city holding the top spot several times on annual rankings of the world's most livable cities, is also not out of this trend. However, unlike many cities where the smartness revolves around technological or environmental objectives, the smart city framework in Vienna is taking a more comprehensive approach where all spheres of life in the city are considered. And we may say that the municipality of Vienna is aiming to build upon the smart heritage of the city, which has 25% of all housing estate being social housing, 50% of all territory being covered with green areas, as well as a very well-functioning public system. And Vienna's biggest smart city experimental lab has to be Seestadt Aspern or Aspern Vienna's urban lakeside. Next slide, please. When we say urban development, we usually think about brushing up on existing aspects of a city. But what if we could design a whole new city within a city from scratch? And the fast-growing 22nd district of Vienna, the Seestadt Aspern district, is doing exactly that and more. Built on top of a former airfield in the far east of Vienna, the Seestadt Aspern is Vienna's current largest urban expansion plan and one of the biggest urban development projects in Europe, truly an incubator for smart city initiatives. And as such, we believe it would be interesting to look into this project. And this multi-stage development project to be completed in 2030 will result in high-quality dwellings for over 25,000 residents, as well as about 20,000 workplaces, along with many other objectives toward a smart, livable, and sustainable city. And the Smart Research Project stands upon 4 pillars, which include smart building, citizen grids, and smart ICT. Next slide, please. And the realization of the project is planned within 3 stages, with the decision-making process involving multiple stakeholders to ensure a bottom-up and user-centered approach. The first phase comprises of a mixed-use neighborhood with at least 2,600 housing units, including student units, as well as offices, retail units, service providers, and R&D institutions. And in the second phase, the rail station and road link will be completed along with further housing and mixed purpose buildings. And we're currently in the third phase where the Lakeside Crescent Quarter section is being developed at the north of the lake. And as you can see, the dominant spatial features in Seestadt is the artificial lake and how, like, as you can see from the map here, how everything is built surrounding the lake. Next slide, please. And currently, over 11,000 people are living here, and more than 5,000 has already worked in the new urban quarter, and nearly all dwellings built so far have been allocated or sold and are already been inhabited. New units are also completed all the time, ranging from a student hostel to family homes or luxury apartments. And also about 500 companies have decided to settle in Seestadt, and they include big, small enterprises, startup, established companies, retail outlets, and industrial corporations. So a good variety. However, how will this project actually turn out in real life and how are they going to be evaluated? Mimi will discuss the positive aspects of this project in the next session. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'll be looking into the strengths of the project. Next slide, please. First, let's look at the sustainable urban planning strengths of the Aspern-Seestadt in terms of recycling resources. When constructing the artificial lake mentioned, around 650,000 tons of earth were excavated, and instead of discarding this earth, it was processed and recycled to build new structures within the project. Concrete from the old airfield runways was also reused to create new paths, which reduced a lot of waste and conserved the resources. Next, the project is also notable for utilizing eco-friendly resources, and a prominent example is the Hohovian, which is the world's second tallest timber building, with 75% of the building made up of sustainably sourced wood native to Austria. Other parts of the Aspern-Seestadt also have homes and community areas made entirely of timber. These choices not only reduce the carbon footprint, but also promote the use of renewable materials. And moving on to energy efficiency, the buildings of Aspern-Seestadt are designed to be more than just energy consumers. They actively participate in the energy market by selling surplus energy to distributors and managing energy distribution within their network. An educational campus, a residential building, and a dormitory greenhouse were all found to equip heat pumps, solar collectors, photovoltaic cells, and hybrid solar systems that made these buildings capable of storing both thermal and electrical energy. And this approach not only makes the community more self-sufficient, but also contributes to the overall stability and efficiency of the energy grid. Next, please. Now, let's take a look at the sustainable mobility strengths of the project, which have been recognized by the VCO and an Austrian Mobility Award for its design. A mobile split was introduced and called for a more sustainable approach to transportation, with 40% of all trips within Aspern-Seestadt made of cycling and walking. another 40% by public transport, and only 20% by car traffic. This not only reduces the carbon emissions, but promotes an overall healthier lifestyle among the residents. Also, Ashburn-Seestadt offers convenient links to the city that ensures the effective connectivity with the rest of Vienna. The area is also serviced by 2 metro lines and 7 bus routes, making it easier for residents to travel across the city without relying too much on private cars. Another important aspect of the project mobility strategy is the managed parking, and the project features communal underground parking facilities with street-level parking restricted to short stays only. This approach helps minimize the presence of cars on the streets, making pedestrians and cyclists priority on ground level space. There was also the Seestadt lot hire scheme, which offered various options for sustainable transport. Residents can hire e-bikes, conventional bikes, and electric cargo bikes, and this initiative not only supports sustainable mobility, but provides for different needs residents may have. Next, please. Ashburn-Seestadt's community-based facilities also showcase more thoughtful urban planning designed to enhance the residents' quality of life, with the schools and kindergartens strategically located near public transport and integrated with green spaces, making the education both accessible and family-friendly. The offices and services are positioned near the metro stations, promoting employment opportunities, and commercial and industrial zones feature a more well-planned commercial area and intentionally placed industrial zones supporting the local business and the overall economy. Cultural facilities include places for religious worship. There's a science campus that attracts high-skilled jobs and promotes innovation. And lastly, walkable amenities reduce car dependency and overall greener alternatives. Overall, these community-based facilities create a more interlinked, sustainable, and lively urban environment. Next, please. Here are some more people-centered amenities that demonstrate the project's focus on community well-being and accessibility. And next, we will have Wenfeng talk about the weaknesses of the project.
Okay, thank you. As Seestadt, as a new program under construction right now, it inevitably has some weaknesses. And now let's go into it. Next slide, please. The first thing is about housing cost. Seestadt enjoys its reputation for affordable housing in Vienna, but does this program really help resolve affordable housing problem? And this survey is conducted by Seestadt Neighborhood Management, and data shows that the aim to cutting down housing costs still has room for realization. According to this survey, more than 80% people said that they spend more than 600 euros a month on their apartments. And it is interesting to compare the current ongoing housing cost with the housing cost before moving into Seestadt. Overall, it can be said that the move made housing more expensive for the majority of those surveyed. And while around a third had to pay more than 800 euros in ongoing housing costs in their previous apartment, 60% of people are faced with correspondingly high costs as a result of their new apartment in Seestadt. Next slide, please. And the second thing is about the efficient facilities and infrastructures. There's a lack of shopping, cultural and entertainment in Seestadt. And some people even call Seestadt as a ghost town. Besides, though low car traffic can be a positive aspect in this district, some residents also pointed out that there's a lack of parking spaces and expensive garage spaces. But this is a matter of trade-offs. The government has cleared to control and limit the private transportation in Seestadt, and to discourage private vehicle ownership. The district provides just only 0.7 parking spaces per home. Now it seems that there's a gap between planning and actual needs, and this limitation may be too harsh for right now. Next slide, please. And the third thing is about the real effect or influences of smart city and connective community. Seestadt is created as a smart city, connective community, and ethical city to some extent. But to the residents' view, the feature of community and social diversity in Seestadt only gains little recognition. Also, it is interesting that some negative connotations features also appear, such as the terms of misplanning and domicity and so on. Next, please. There are other criticisms over the planning and constructions in Aspenstadt, such as the over-dimensioned streets and a lack of diversity activity space for different age of peoples, missing links between some ground floors building programs and their adjacent public streetscapes. All in all, Aspenstadt continued to act as a laboratory for social innovation. Although some indicators still show a room for improvement, but based on the result of the settlement monitoring, there are good reasons to argue that the local population is willing and ready to be engaged in co-producing solutions. For future development, let's welcome Yuri to give us a speech on the recommendations.
Hi, so I will be discussing recommendations for which I think can enhance this initiative further. And so first off, so housing costs, I have three propositions for lowering them. So first is the public-private partnerships, which they can encourage more public-private partnerships to share the financial burden and attract investment for affordable housing projects. Also subsidies and incentives, or like tax incentives to developers who include affordable housing units in their projects, and rent control measures, so implementing rent control measures to prevent rapid increase in rental prices and ensure affordability for lower income residents. And another recommendation I would like to make is the integration of technology. And I'd like to start off with an example from Barcelona, Spain, which I think implemented technology well. And so their initiative is grouped under 4 topics of smart governance, smart economy, smart living, and smart people. And other than tools such as kiosks and maps, smart governance involves a major initiative such as open data, which aims to provide better access to government information, and smart economy involves the creation of innovation clusters and a triple helix concept where companies, faculties, and citizens can interact and collaborate so that innovation can be fostered through these networks. Smart living mainly targets new technology adoptions that are usually initiated by municipal police and tool developments for public transport. And finally, smart people mainly involves training programs for digital literacy. And so some examples of their smart living technology include smart public street lighting that uses motion sensors to adjust street lighting based on pedestrian and vehicle movement, saving energy and reducing light pollution, and an eco-digital with LED technology that includes sensors for various things, and a smart waste management, which uses ultrasonic sensors in waste containers to measure fill levels. And this data allows sanitation workers to optimize collection routes, reducing emissions and fuel costs. Additionally, some bins connect to underground repositories where waste is vacuumed through underground pipes, which minimizes noise and congestion from garbage trucks. So according to Strauss et al., Aspenstadt is a smart city that doesn't really put too much focus on technological aspects, but instead focuses on sustainable and urban development. However, I do think that the city can benefit from implementing technology in the future. They have a CSTAT Technology Center that can initiate more like technology implementation. And if and when the city does do that for like technology that's used by the public, for example, like kiosks, they can ensure inclusivity with accessibility features like voice command and screen readers, also creating a user-friendly interface that accommodates all ages and groups, like multi-language systems, while also offering tech support to anyone in need. And if or when technology becomes a larger goal in this initiative, privacy protection would be an important factor. So the transparency of privacy policies, so things like data collection, how it's used, stored, etc., need to be explicit. The community should be given the option if they want or do not want their data to be collected. And lastly, robust cybersecurity measures are important to ensure digital safety and protection. And so overall, the initiative can benefit from feedback mechanisms and community engagement to combat their weaknesses. And that is all from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe round of applause. That was great. Thank you. Just one second. I was going to change the camera there. So it's interesting because it's described as a smart city, but it seems a very narrow definition of smart city from my experience. And as you just pointed out at the end there, Yuri, doesn't seem to be the emphasis on smart technologies or the introduction of smart technologies to that city. Is there any reason why there isn't the same? Why it's simply focusing on things like sustainability, and why they haven't done more along the lines of the model that you gave from Barcelona? What would be your thoughts on that? Anyone? Why is it so narrow in terms of its focus? Anyone?
There wasn't really like explicit like reasons on why as Guernsey that hasn't like implemented too much technology, but from like past or like prior knowledge, like my assumption is that with whole like privacy protection and like it gets like complicated like when people start implementing technology and then there's like privacy breaches or like hackers or like I feel like it's difficult uh for privacy policies to also be 100% transparent. And so I think that that could be kind of like a barrier as to why they haven't really started or like it's not like a bigger goal in their smart city.
I see. Is it also something to do with who the developer is? So, for instance, in many of the smart cities that you see in different parts of the world, there's like IT companies are really heavily involved. And that's also one reason why Barcelona has the policies in place that it has, because they want to somehow regulate or control what those IT companies are doing. And I just wondered, when you look at the developer in this context, do you have any particular observations about them? What's their background, and are they an IT company or are they more like a sustainability company?
I think it has to do with like I mentioned at the beginning, the smart city framework of Vienna as well. Because like if you look at the framework that they put out, they focus a lot on like quality of living as well as like resources management. And so I and like among the partnerships, it's also focused mostly on those aspects rather than the IT aspects. So I think it has to be like them building on what they already have and like basically trying to expand on that. So I guess like with that foundation, the focus is not really on the technological aspect.
Okay, that's very interesting, and not something I realized was happening in Vienna. But I'm really happy that one of the presentations has dealt with the smart city, because it's a little bit of a gap in the course. We haven't addressed issues around smart cities in general, but I do agree with you that there are lots of concerns about how data is used, who has a say on what technologies are employed, and so on. So I think it's a really, really good case study, and I think you presented it very well. So thank you very much for that. Could you send me your slides, please? That would be great. I'd like to have them as a record.
Should I add them in the Dropbox or should I send to CLE?
Dropbox, please. That would be fantastic.
Okay.
Great. Any questions from anybody? How about online? Does anyone have a question? If you do, just raise your hand. Okay, I am not seeing anybody raising their hands, so we'll go to the next presentation, which is a recording. You're fourth, yeah. Okay, great. So let me try to get this one ready. Just give me a second, please. Okay, so this is group 3. Would somebody from group 3 like to quickly introduce what your topic is, how you came to? Can you come a little bit closer? I'm going to, while I just share this, let's go to share. Okay, everybody should be able to see that. Okay, please introduce it.
I think we also have an introduction at the beginning of the video, but we basically choose Medellin because maybe there hasn't been a lot of focus on Latin America so far, mainly Europe and Asia. So we thought that might be interesting.
Okay, great.
And it has a interesting history and a quite stunning turnaround.
Okay, fantastic. So actually, today we have 2 presentations from Latin America, so that gap is also being covered, which is fantastic too. Okay, then I'm going to try to go to full. Oh, hang on, sorry, that's the opposite way. Just a second, please. Back. All right, is everybody seeing that fine? Yep, all good? Okay, so I'm going to start it now then.
Hello everyone. Today we will be doing a presentation on Medellin in Colombia. We will start by providing some background information about the city, then the problems the city faced and how it solved the problems. And finally, we will be ending off with some critiques and suggest some potential enhancements to the current solutions. Medellin is the second largest city in Colombia, just after Bogota. It used to be one of the world's most violent cities in the 90s when drug trafficking was very active in the city. However, due to improvements made by the Colombian government after the downfall of the Medellin drug cartel, quality of life increased in poor and violent areas of Medellin, and the murder rate dropped to 3.7% of what it used to be in the 90s. In 2016, Medellin even won the Lee Kuan Yew World City Prize, an international award honoring outstanding cities in creating livable, vibrant, and sustainable urban communities. To learn how Medellin became the city it is today, we travel back in time to the late 20th century when the city was plagued by drug cartels, political corruption, and even deaths. We will be focusing on one of the biggest problems that Medellin has faced, the Medellin drug cartel. A warning ahead, there might be some images that shows weaponry and drugs. The Medellin drug cartel was founded in the 1970s by the infamous Pablo Escobar and the Ochoa Vasquez brothers. However, Escobar's hold on Medellin was only solidified in the 1980s when he founded Oficina de Envigado, a criminal debt collection service aimed to collect debts owed to him by drug traffickers and kill those who refused. The growth of the Medellin drug cartel relied on its efficient logistics and transport network to ship cocaine into the US. For the drug cartel to survive with the police and government consistently searching and closing down their smuggling routes, there was a need for innovative smuggling techniques. Small planes loaded with cocaine were flown below US radar, or mixing cocaine into food and drinks and even soaked into blue jeans were some of the ways cocaine was smuggled into the US from Colombia. Also, Escobar was known to handle problems via plata o plomo, meaning silver, bribes, or lead, bullets. Anyone who goes against him were killed, including numerous police officers and government officials. In addition to innovative smuggling routes and thefts, Escobar invested profits earned from the drug cartel back into businesses and local communities within Medellin, improving the lives of people in poor and violent areas. However, his Robin Hood archetype did not come without ulterior motives. Escobar improved the lives of the local in Medellin to gain votes so that he could be part of the political circle in Colombia. One of the main reasons for the massive growth of the drug cartel was the high demand for cocaine in the US. Consumption of the drug increased fourfold during the cartel's heydays, much of it fueled by the drug's recreational use amongst youth in the US. The Medellin drug cartel was a problem to Colombia because it was highly violent and corrupted. Escobar's way of handling problems caused Medellin to have the highest murder rate in the world. In addition to excessive murders, the drug cartel had ties with allies in security and justice institutions, allowing the cartel members to get away with their illegal activities as they are protected from prosecution. As mentioned earlier, Escobar was even elected to Congress due to the votes garnered by improving living conditions of the local communities. Lastly, by being the biggest drug exporter into the US, the Medellin drug cartel played a part in spreading terrorism from drug use. With the increased consumption of cocaine, more local drug gangs were formed and communities were terrorized by their activities. Also, drug consumption among teens continued to climb due to its recreational use. Amongst all the deaths, spreading of terrorism, and political corruption, the Medellin drug cartel did bring about some good to the city in the form of improving the living conditions of the local communities. Also, its existence was cemented in Medellin's history, serving as a reminder to the people of its impact on Medellin. Despite the attempt to garner votes to obtain a spot in the government, Escobar did use his fortune from the cartel to improve the comunes or the neighborhoods in Medellin. Over 5,000 homes were built with the help of a former director of city planning. The new housing replaced the slums and fulfilled basic needs of the local community, improving their living conditions. Also, despite the violence and corruption, Medellin was never short on money or experienced any urban decay during Escobar's rise to power. Unfortunately, after the downfall of the cartel, the influx of money from the cartel halted and Medellin's growth was stamped. The city had to slowly recover from the effects of the downfall. Nowadays, the cartel shaped the city and is cemented in its history. Its citizens chose to retain the history and impact of the cartel to educate the ill-informed and honor the fallen or harmed during the cartel's heydays.
I'm now going to present the solutions. The first solution is social urbanism. This is also the main solution. It focuses on improving public spaces and infrastructure in the poorest neighborhoods. Before 1991, there were no public spaces, but after 1991, the Constitution recognized public space as a constitutional right. Social urbanism promotes community-oriented sustainable development and is made up of three key components. The physical component focuses on enhancing public spaces, community facilities, housing, transportation, and environmental sustainability. The social part emphasizes the ongoing community dialogue and collaboration. The institutional part coordinates municipal efforts to support and sustain urban development in alignment with community needs. Examples include the construction of public buildings in the poorest neighborhoods, the construction of new schools, and also of large parks that double as museums and libraries, and they also include spaces for public artworks, science, and botanical gardens. The city of Medellin also implemented a metro and a public gondola system to connect inaccessible poor hilltop communities with the city center. The commuting time for those is very drastically reduced, as the average travel time to the city center used to be an hour and is now cut down to 15 minutes, but this excludes the queuing time. In 2012, Medellin also established a green belt which circles the highlands of the city and includes footpaths, bike lanes, ecological restoration, and native ecosystems, as well as sustainable housing. And the city also included community living around the green belt and provides employment and educational opportunities. This solution resulted in a decline in poverty after social infrastructure programs were implemented because of education, health, and youth services being promoted. Another important aspect is the access to basic services. The city now provides access to quality sanitation and clean water, especially in the underserved areas. And as of 2017, the city had the best access to clean water and sanitation among the cities of its size and wealth in Colombia. Another important solution is community engagement and youth programs. Organizations like Masterpiece implemented youth-focused initiatives such as youth boot camps, art, dance, and writing classes, and the promotion of social businesses, all in order to create community solidarity. The city government also increased its presence in gang-controlled neighborhoods by placing liaisons to coordinate and provide routine problem-solving and intensifying the delivery of existing city services. The idea was to enhance problem-solving and dispute resolutions at the local level, but this did not have any effect on the crime and therefore was deemed to not have worked out properly. Another important solution is the economic development and the opportunities provided by it. The public investments are based on the data from the Human Development Index, and the areas with the lowest indicators receive investment. Also, participatory planning and budgeting programs were created to bring urban planning and the governance closer to the citizenry. Social programs are also involved, as business development support centers were launched in the poorest parts of the town, offering free technical advice and loans to residents interested in launching their own micro-enterprises. Lastly, negotiations are also an important solution. The Total Peace Policy is aiming to negotiate simultaneously with a total of 20 armed groups, and in 2022 the gang leaders agreed to a truce. The national government also established a negotiation table to facilitate this process, and they used the opportunity with the gangs to end the cycle of violence. This is a very new solution, so no clear results can be drawn on how effective it is in terms of data, as there is no data yet.
Next, we would like to take a look at the results of the actions taken in Medellin. In order to determine what has been successful and what hasn't, we will use some data. The first indicator of the success of Medellin is its growth in population. Colombia has grown from around 40 million in 2000 to 52 million inhabitants today. This is a growth rate of roughly 30%. Medellin has grown around 50% in the same period of time and still has an annual growth rate of just under 1%. Furthermore, the homicide rate in Medellin has been drastically decreased. 1991 marked Medellin's deadliest year, and the murder rate peaked at 375 people per 100,000. Now this number hovers around 20 people, which equals US cities with high crime rates such as Chicago. This graph lists the historical events that first led to a drastic increase in violence and finally to the comparatively low numbers of today. It shows the strong correlation between the increase in safety for the citizens of Medellin and a decreasing influence of Pablo Escobar and other drug cartels. Medellin's poverty and unemployment rate both decreased by over 50%, and its economy now accounts for 10% of the GDP for all of Colombia. Here are just some of the accomplishments Medellin has achieved. In order to honor Medellin's unprecedented turnaround, it received many awards, most notably in 2013 the title as Most Innovative City in the World. This award is presented by the Wall Street Journal magazine and Citibank. Medellin was chosen over other cities such as New York City or Tel Aviv for its progress and potential. Following Medellin's improved reputation, it now has become a popular tourist destination. It has overtaken other tourist hotspots such as Cartagena and is now the second most visited city in Colombia right after the capital, Bogotá. In 2023 alone, Medellin had more than 600,000 international visitors. However, while Medellin has made substantial progress on many of its issues, it still faces challenges in regard to crime, poverty, and inequality. Projects such as the metro cable are essential but haven't solved the social problems in its entirety. Research shows the metro cable only improved the living conditions of the people who live close to its stations. In addition, its passenger capacity is limited, and the situation will become more tense given the growing population and increasing number of tourists. According to a recent study, each inhabitant of Medellin has only 3.6 square meters of public space. These can be places such as parks, squares, and green areas. While there were essentially no public spaces in the 1990s, according to the World Health Organization, 10 to 15 square meters per habitant are recommended, which means Medellin still has a deficit. However, by 2030, it aims to have 15 square meters of public space per person. Another area in which improvement can be achieved are the rural areas of Medellin. Medellin is composed of 30% urban area and 70% rural area. If the central administration focuses solely on urban development, the vast majority of Medellin's territory ends up with policies not well suited for them. Therefore, it is crucial to take the geographical complexity of Medellin into consideration when new solutions are developed. One such approach could be to further support bottom-up initiatives organized by locals. For example, there has been a community gardening project in Alta Vista, a neighborhood in Medellin. This garden is located at the back of a school and is taken care of by members of the community as well as students of that school. Through this project, the Alta Vista community gains food security, adequate nourishment for their children, and knowledge of sustainable harvesting practices. They can then use their acquired skills and replicate the process in their own homes. Of course, this can only serve as one first step of many that are needed in order to further improve the living conditions in Alta Vista and Medellin as a whole. With this, we reach our conclusion. Peace deals and law enforcement have played an important role in reducing crime in Medellin. However, the city flourished because its officials decided to attack the root of the problem, which leads to long-term sustainable solutions. The programs teach a valuable lesson on the importance of revitalizing the dignity of marginalized communities. Medellin is a prime example of how access to basic needs can transform cities as well as countries. Here you can see our sources. Thank you for your attention.
Well done. That's I think that's a classic case study there in terms of how a city that's really in trouble can transform itself. When you think about the, well, 1991 was the peak of murders. To get it from where it was to where it is now is quite extraordinary, I think. And it's interesting because I think that if you look at the top 100 most dangerous cities in the world, they're mainly in South America and North America. And Mexico, of course, is a really, really high level of murders per capita there. And this, I think the Medellin model shows that it is possible to bring about a change like this. But I also think it has to happen in a certain context. And I feel that what the police did and the military was really critical in bringing about that transformation. So when you talked about it, it sounded kind of quite, how do you say, as though it was dealt with in a reasonable way, but it was actually quite tough, wasn't it, what they did to the gangs? Did you look into a little bit about how they dealt with the gangs and how they were able to break them? Well, the government and police together, wasn't it?
Not that much. Like the articles I read, they're mainly focused on what the gangs wanted, and like many of them also wanted to achieve a kind of peace.
Right.
But there wasn't that much of how they handled it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they had to basically break the gangs at one point and then put them all into prison. But it was like a paramilitary operation to break the gangs. But I also think this case study is a good example of the important role that policing can play in achieving an ethical city. And you do need an ethical police force, which is another problem area, because we're all familiar with corruption within the police and how difficult that can be. But what I thought was really good is that you introduce this idea of social urbanism. And social urbanism is essentially what other cities are trying to copy from Medellin, and it's called the Medellin model. And I mean, you just nailed it. You got it, in the complete description of the key elements there. But the Greenbelt is interesting, isn't it? The Greenbelt is also seen as part of the method of responding or part of the social urbanism. But in many other places, the green belt doesn't have that role at all. It's kind of interesting. And also the metro system and the gondola is that's the question. Has anybody here been to Latin America? Anyone?
Yes.
Mickey, where have you been to?
I did a year-long exchange in high school in Peru.
Oh, okay.
And I've also been to Mexico City.
I mean, I think Peru is seen as a relatively stable country in Latin America, from what I've heard. But
What?
what was it like?
I was in a smaller city, like 3 hours south of Lima, like 300,000 people, I think. But it was quite dangerous. Yeah. Peru has lots of crimes against women. So you have to be quite careful, like, yeah, walking around. Yeah, in terms of safety, yeah, you just have to be like a lot more aware. But the city I was in was really interesting because it was in the desert. Like it kind of looked like Dubai. And it's basically like been built in the middle of all these sand dunes. So I don't really know the history of how it got to be there that much. But yeah, Peru's like extremely diverse, so it's really interesting to travel to different cities, and the way they all work is very different.
Great. Well, I also wonder who is planning to go to Latin America. Okay, we have some hands going up here. To Brazil. Oh, okay, great. What about you? I mean,
My friend is living in Argentina.
okay. So do you think I'm painting an unfair picture? Is it something like you have to go and see for yourself to actually know what it's like, or a reputation is built about Latin American cities and Mesoamerican cities that isn't necessarily accurate? Or do you like risky places? You like to visit risky places? Ruben, you have your hand up, yeah.
But at the same time, like, yes, there are places areas that are dangerous.
Yeah.
It's wrong. So when you live there, you're exposed to it. Places, but
right.
At the same time, it's also just like in general. They have massive practice. It's very consistent, but it's not like review.
Right.
Like saying it's not like under.
Right. You get used to different circumstances, and you probably develop a different strategy based on that. So, for instance, if you think that some Japanese cities are very, very safe, then you'll go around and you probably won't take care of your phone and how you use it, and you may be a little bit less careful about where your wallet is and so on. But if you go to another city that has a lot of pickpockets or whatever, then you're going to be careful in that context. And if you're going to a Latin American city where there's other challenges, then you'd also be you'd have to have another strategy. And if you're living there, then you need to be very careful what strategy you have. You probably know, like, don't go to that particular area at 6 o'clock in the evening because it's dangerous. Some people would say, for instance, don't go to Kabukicho in Shinjuku in Tokyo, unless you have a very clear reason for doing it, because it's just a little bit seedy area. So yeah, I think people live in those cities, but it's also a little bit of a shame that you do have places where you feel more danger and you do need to be more careful and so on. But that's also, I guess, the reality. Miki, did you want to say something? You had your hands raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, similarly to that, you just have to be, you have different concerns in different cities. So like being from the States, although I did have to like be more careful about certain kinds of crime, for example, in Latin America, I'm much less like concerned about being shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even like, for example, in Mexico City, which is known for a lot of crime, still like the metro system, for example, always has cars exclusively for women, which like everybody talks about cars for women in Japan, but I've like never ridden in a car for women in Osaka that actually only had women. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So in America, you may be worried that you'll get shot in a city. In Britain, it's knife crime is the problem. So it really does vary according to the places. Okay, well, we have one presentation left. How do you want to do it? Do you want to come up here or to present? Okay. Your slides are already there, so you just bring your computer and I'll. Yeah, I saw that. And then you just, but you need to move, somebody needs to control them. And okay, so let's move the camera back a little bit so that we get all of you in. Oh, you're gonna go there.
So we see, oh, wait, we see there.
Yeah.
For the camera.
Yeah.
Like everything looks for us.
Is let's see if we get you in the camera. Yeah, okay. Are you there? Yes, you're there. So this is the camera. So when it's good.
Should we sit?
Whatever you like. You seem like you want to stand. Okay.
Okay, so the process of establishing boundaries is essentially political, and because it determines who is included within the space and who is excluded. And so these limits not only determine membership, but also create zones that are suited to political, economic, and social activities. And so the use of physical space, generally speaking, to form social settings has a long history in America. And this is why we chose to talk about the city of Chicago. One significant example of this phenomena is the rise of gated communities across the country in the 1980s, in a period of tremendous demographic, economic, and social shifts. So many, American citizens remain concerned about the future of the country, but especially the stability of their neighborhoods and the security. So while gated communities first became popular in retirement communities, they have since moved to major metropolitan areas across the country, such as Chicago, that has experienced a significant increase of gated enclaves, increasing social gaps inside and within the city. So from the towering skyscrapers of the Loop to the historic brownstones of Bronzeville, Chicago's urban fabric is stitched with distinctions based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic positions, resulting in different enclaves and inequalities within the city.
So in this presentation, we investigate the intricate interplay between spatial and social boundaries in Chicago in an attempt to understand the fundamental mechanism that perpetuate urban divisions. So arguing that spatial limits, particularly in communities like South Side and the Gold Coast, interact with social boundaries, resulting in significant inequities in access to resources, opportunities, and quality of life. By examining the historical context, current reality, empirical data, and several solutions, we aim to put light on the complex dynamics of urban segregation and inequality in Chicago. Throughout the presentation, we aim to not only reveal the underlying causes of Chicago's urban divisions, but also to prompt critical reflection on their consequences for social justice, equity, and community cohesiveness. So first, I'll do a brief introduction to Chicago. So Chicago is the third largest city in the United States, with a population of nearly 3 million people. The city is located in the state of Illinois on the western shore of the Lake Michigan, one of the 5 Great Lakes. The city's location along the lake has played a crucial role in its development as a major port and transportation hub. Incorporated as a city in 1837, Chicago was ideally situated to take advantage of the trading possibilities created by the nation's westward expansion. In 1848, the Illinois and Michigan Canal opened, connecting the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River. That same year, the city's first railroad opened, turning Chicago into a major transportation hub. So even though the city was devastated by a massive fire in 1871, Chicago had the strength to rebuild and modernize itself even better than before and continued to attract countless thousands of people from around the world who settled in the Midwest in a quest for a better life.
So our first part is about the historical context. Following World War II, significant reconstruction efforts changed the urban environment in Chicago, resulting in the demolition of entire districts and the displacement of hundreds and thousands of citizens to make room for new stadiums, middle-class homes, and highways. So the reconstruction projects, which frequently replaced actually, and specifically the Black neighborhoods, with modernist apartment complexes and freeways designed only for the white suburbanites, highlighted the systematic disparities that African Americans faced and continue to face today. So as explained in this book entitled American Apartheid by Massey and Denton, during the post-war period, however, Chicago experienced a substantial demographic shift with Black people moving into previously white inhabited districts known as transition areas. And so although the city's thriving economy drew a large number of rural migrant workers from Mexico, Puerto Rico, and the South United States, today we count over 500,000 Black Americans that fled to Chicago in response to racial prejudice and violence in their own and within their own communities. So in Chicago, at this time in history, like post-war, ethnic enclaves were common with Polish and Bohemian groups concentrated on the west side, Germans around the northern lakefront, and Jewish settlements north of Madison Street and the southern lakefront. So I know it's difficult to imagine the different locations and the different names, but just to show you how they were all divided and they were all divided into specific communities. So each community lived with each other and wouldn't mix with the others.
So in sharp contrast, Black residents in Chicago faced severe space limit. So early Black migrants fleeing Jim Crow South were confined to a small tract along Lake Michigan known as the Chicago Black Belt, which serves as the main enclave for Black inhabitants until the 1940s. As the Black population grew, villages formed further south and along the north branch of the Chicago River. Massey and Denton's study highlights how geographical segregation intended to prevent violence furthered racial inequality by systematically marginalizing Black community and restricting their access to decent education, jobs, and social services. Examining Chicago's segregation legacy revealed its impact on Black residents, socioeconomic mobility, and well-being, highlighting the systematic barrier sustaining urban categorization in contemporary America.
So to go over quickly some empirical data and to understand, so this is a map just to show the community settlements for 1950. So as you can see, again, there's a decoupage. There is a, it's being cut into pieces and to therefore showing this again, once again, this idea of division. And so, okay, so this map provided by the Southside Weekly, an independent community newspaper representing Chicago's South Side, depicts demographic variations in the city population between 1930 and 2020. So we just selected a few dates. So here we have 1940, 1970, and then after 2020. And so all we're seeing is, again, this pattern that there's a long-standing barrier erected by municipal politicians to preserve segregation, which prevents the Black Chicagoans and citizens of other racial ethnicities from living, working, and socializing together in the same neighborhoods. So again, this is perpetuating the issue, and I'm going to just go quickly, briefly on this because I'm worried about time. But again, here we can see the evolution but it stays the same. All communities are together, even if, for example, they're expanding or going into new neighborhoods, at the end they stay among each other. And this is also what we can see in 2020. So there are the different races. I don't think that's the right usage of words, but races and then the disparities shown on the right. And so we can see that although, again, they're in the same place, which is Chicago, they're all divided and living in segregated regions. Yeah. So now we're going to talk about, now that we've seen the historical context, a bit of the empirical data of the change and the shifts between 1930 and 2020, we're going to go into the current reality. So as shown, the changing ratios of white and Black Chicago residents have persisted despite the repeal of racially restrictive covenants and the elimination of visible signs of segregation, such as raised public housing complex, which was very common in the past. The systematic split created by the city's policies continue to this day, with Chicago continuously ranking as one of the most segregated large cities in America, according to the Dissimilarity Index. So just to give you an idea, the Dissimilarity Index is an index that analyzes the evenness of group distribution within a specific territory and a specific geographic area, which gives light on long-standing discrepancies once again. So according to a 2021 study conducted by Brown University, Chicago ranks 5th in terms of the highest similarity index, which is, once again, this is also why we chose to talk about the city in this particular context, because it really ranks high in the dissimilarity index. So in the Chicago metropolitan region, the dissimilarity index for Black people, for example, was of 73.8, which means, to give you an idea, that 74% of the white residents that in that neighborhood would need to transfer to another neighborhood to establish an equal distribution of white and Black Chicagoans throughout the city, which is, again, an extremely high percentage. The study also demonstrates how Black Chicago residents face some of the greatest challenges and degrees of isolation among metropolitan communities. So, for example, again, another number to retain or to get an idea is 62.8, suggesting that Black citizens engage primarily with their own people from their own ethnic group. And so an interesting author, but I'm going to be very brief again, is Hart, and his book on political manipulation of urban space, the raising of District 6 Cape Town. So he discusses South Africa and how political power and urban space come hand in hand in creating spatial segregation. But we felt that it was very pertinent to understand his analysis and his way of seeing the urban space in the case of Chicago as well, because his theory is very consistent.
So home ownership is seen as a path to prosperity, stability, and mobility. However, in Chicago, there is a significant gap in home ownership rates between Black and white individuals. So from 2010 to 2019, owner-occupied dwellings in Black communities dropped by 13.6%. These dwellings are concentrated in the Northeast and far Southwest, where white population are predominant. Still, significant Black home ownership exists in the South Side outskirts, showing stability among the Black middle class. Despite home ownership's importance, Black home owners face property undervaluation, higher foreclosure rates, and more vacancies, especially in predominantly Black areas. This disparity has worsened over time, with homes in 90 to 100% Black communities, values 140,000, which underscores the impact of racial composition on housing values.
So we need to be shared.
Sorry.
It's okay.
There you go.
Okay. As we explained earlier, the historical and current context of Chicago, I'm going to focus on solutions and innovative approach, and specifically maybe implementing AI into the Chicago problem. The omnipresent issues of economic and racial segregation in Chicago has significant effects on income level, educational attainment, and overall quality of life for communities. Addressing this complex problem requires innovative solutions, and AI, since it's developing incredibly fast, can lead to promising solutions to mitigate these challenges. So AI can be useful, is one of the most powerful to plan to do urban planning. The ability to identify and map segregation patterns with unprecedented accuracy. Machine learning algorithm can analyze vast data sets, including census data, housing records, and socioeconomic indicators to reveal the hidden dynamics of segregation. This comprehensive mapping enables urban planners to visualize the spatial distribution of different demographic groups and understand how segregation evolves over time. With detailed insights into segregation patterns, AI can facilitate more targeted interventions. For instance, algorithm can identify neighborhoods that lack access to quality education, healthcare, and other essential services. By pinpointing these areas, city officials can prioritize resource allocation to bridge the gaps. AI-driven tools can also optimize public service delivery, ensuring that resources are directed where they are most needed, thus providing the overall efficiency of social programs. Another example of using AI into a city would be to enhance the public transportation network. AI has significant potential in optimizing public transportation routes to better connect segregated neighborhoods with economic hubs. Machine learning models can analyze commuting patterns, traffic data, and population density to design efficient transit networks. Improved connectivity enhances employment opportunities for residents of marginalized areas, reducing the economic disparities caused by segregation. For example, smart routing systems can dynamically adjust bus and train schedules to accommodate peak travel times and underserved routes. It's something that is already been implemented into China. And another way to optimize those network of transportation that goes off the topic of AI, but is something that I saw is optimizing network. It was done with Tokyo train network with Blob. So it just simulates the city and it links it does the most efficient way to link the city. So by modifying and the simulation can do the best thing to this. AI can also be implemented to policy making. Predictive analytics powered by AI can be a game changer in urban policy making. By simulating the potential impacts of proposed policies and infrastructural changes, AI model can forecast outcomes and identify unintended consequences. This foresight would allow policymakers to refine their strategies, ensuring that efforts to reduce segregation are both effective and sustainable. For example, predictive model could assess how new housing development or zoning changes might affect neighborhoods, demographic, and socioeconomic conditions. But incorporating AI community feedback into AI system is crucial for addressing urban segregation. AI analysis tool can analyze social media surveys and public forums to gauge community sentiments and needs. This real-time data collection enables city officials to adjust their strategies based on residents' concerns and preferences. Engaging communities in the decision-making process ensures that AI-driven initiatives are inclusive and responsive to the lived experience of those affected by segregation. If we want this to be really efficient, we should try to have a lot of measurements, maybe through rewards and measurements to encourage people and community to give feedbacks. But it's also important, however, to consider that AI is a powerful tool, but we might want to make it ethical because AI systems, we want to make sure that AI does not perpetuate existing inequalities. Developing ethical framework for AI usage that prioritizes transparency, accountability, and fairness is essential. This includes auditing AI algorithms regularly to detect and mitigate biases, ensuring equitable outcomes for all communities. And it's important to consider that AI is mainly processed by corporations that follow, for most of them, profit models. And nationalizing this company can maybe be a way to enhance the process of being ethical. So now some numbers of AI being applied to Chicago. So AI reduced AI intervention will reduce segregation rates of 15% with the way the areas developed. Like it decreased commuting time for segregated neighborhoods to economic areas of 25%. It decreased access to healthcare of 20%, and it could also help for urban planners to visualize their data by making urban maps.
And finally, just to be very quick, so in conclusion, the urban divisions within Chicago reveals an enduring effect of racial segregation and geographical disparity in the urban settings. And so again, understanding the historical investigations, the theoretical frameworks through the authors and empirical data that we revealed, we see how systemic impediments and discriminatory behaviors continue to sustain themselves and sustain racial and ethnic divisions, influencing the city's social and geographical dynamics. And so this is why, despite the efforts and to address these disparities, it's important to continue and to highlight the necessity for more thorough and equitable urban policies that stress inclusive growth and access to resources and social justice.
We're a little bit over time. I don't know if anybody has a class that they have to rush off to. Okay, but it's a great topic, and I feel like it's a shame we don't have more time to discuss. I'm not completely convinced that AI will be the solution to this problem, but it's part of the solution. It's definitely part of the solution. Does anyone have any comments? And I guess everybody has to rush off there. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Please send me your slides.
Yes, I will do that.
And thanks everybody for participating in the class. Thank you. Really.
Thank you.
I know, but it's such an interesting topic that it really deserves more time than 15 minutes.
It's important to also, like, before going into the initiatives and the approaches, important to understand the whole context. So even having to like explain, it's important to understand the current situation, the historical situation, to understand the initiative.
Exactly.
So it is.
And I have lots of questions, but there just isn't time to ask them. Yeah, next week we can carry on.
Thank you.
Okay, see you all next week. Thanks for joining online, and please send your slides to me beforehand. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
The usage of AI influenced by family reporting. It's just like I have some sources.
Oh, if you're using just right, that how you use it.
Does it influence if I was right?
No, it doesn't. As long as you're clear that you just generally just like AI was used. I use AI to do this, and that's fine. What will happen is that there's on Turnitin, there's a kind of originality check.
Yeah, that's
all there is.
So I was just wondering, because I have some sources, some papers that are like 30 pages, and I'm not sure if I have enough time to read all of them. So I was thinking of asking an AI to summarize and see if it's relevant for me.
Totally. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's the way academia is going now, but I think the main point is to be open and transparent about how you use things. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Sorry, may I ask a question?
1 second. I'm gonna end.